Let's start our webinar. Welcome everyone to Applico's webinar on planning for your budget and using Excel to plan your budget for 2022. Just before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Salome Kruger. I am the Managing Director of Applico Training and Services. My journey with Excel started about 20 years ago, and I was working in the finance industry in London doing some reporting, obviously using Excel quite a bit for that as well. Moving back to South Africa, I was lucky enough to be able to specialize in Sage Intelligence around 2010. Of course, Sage Intelligence also using Excel quite intensively for reporting in finance and various types of industries. I also would like to tell you a little bit more about Applico. So training being one of my passions, empowering people to learn more and to use Excel in the best way that they can. I became a trainer at Applico. Knowing a little bit more about what we deliver as a company. We are part of the Sage group, the AWK group. We are a Sage partner, a Sage authorized learning delivery center, the only one in Cape Town delivering classroom training. We've got COVID compliant classroom here right next to the Kenilworth racecourse. You might be hearing some lawn mowers through our session. I apologize for that. That is the racecourse right next to us. Our classrooms also, we are lucky enough to have a partner, and part of our group is AW Power delivering some solar PV systems. So we've got uninterrupted training using solar power as well. We also deliver training in virtual capacity, so we would have instructor-led training. We've got some consultants and highly skilled trainers delivering that virtually instructor-led. We also provide on-site training, going out to our customers. We love to travel to them as well and see what their sites look like. So we've got that as a delivery method as well. Applico also being a BE level 2 contributor and part of the Sage group delivering training in that as well. So I also mentioned AW Cape. We are part of the AW Cape group. We've got a large pool of Sage certified consultants. We deliver the solutions together with training in various packages, Sage Intact, Sage 300 People, Premier, Sage 300 Cloud AppPack, and so forth. We commit to delivering training in those packages as well as the deployment of our solutions in that. A little bit more about our customers. So in the last couple of years, we've been lucky enough to have wonderful customers delivering training to various industries. Le Creuset, we delivered some Excel training a while ago at the Somerset West offices. We had a group of finance ladies in that class. Rolla, we've done some training in Sage 300 People as well. We are currently in a big project with Breede Valley Municipality, going to deliver some training in the HR modules on site as well. And as you can see, we're lucky enough to have a big group of companies joining us for training as well. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about us and about me, let's get to why we are all here today. So we are looking at making budgeting easy and focusing on Microsoft Excel as a tool to budget and plan for 2022. And before we start with digging into what Microsoft Excel can actually do for us, let's take a moment and actually think why we budget. And this is very important because we need to think about the plan that we want to end up. So I am going to quickly ask you a question, and I want you to participate in our poll and tell us why you budget. I'm going to launch that poll, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why we budget. Is it to measure your performing financially? Is it to stop you from overspending? Is it to assist you with saving, or is it all of the above? The reason why we ask this is because it's going to be important for you to create the way the budget is going to look in Excel using these measures and thinking about them ahead before you actually embark on creating your Excel document. So let's launch that poll, and you guys get to tell me a little bit about why you budget. Just bear with me a second, I'm waiting for the poll to pop up. Okay, there you go. So you should be seeing that question popping up on your screen, and I'll give you a minute or two to give us some feedback. Got 14 responses, got some responses, all of the above. Some just saying that they are, 6% saying that they are stopping themselves from overspending. Yes, that's quite an important reason. I've got some people saying, still 90% saying all of the above. So lots of things to think about in our planning in Excel and what we want to end up with before we actually launch into creating our Excel document as well. Then, together with that, as we are working in Excel, we face a lot of challenges, especially if we are not familiar with using Excel. And one of the things that we need to think about is how we make sense of our data. So another question to you is, what challenges are you facing in Excel at the moment? Are you struggling to make sense of large amounts of data? Are you getting data from different places and you can't make sense of it? Are you struggling to design something that is automated and adaptable for reporting? So something that can change in the future should the budget need to be adapted. Are you struggling to visualize what these figures mean? So I'm going to launch another poll. I'm making you work this morning and thinking about what your challenges are so that you can tell me, what are your main challenges in Excel? I'll give you a couple of minutes with regards to that. Got some responses in. Designing something that is automated and adaptable seems to be the largest challenge. Making sense of large amounts of data, not a lot of visualization complaints. Okay. All right. So now, taking these challenges, let's face them and let's have a look at what we want to achieve in our design of our Excel document to use for budgeting. And we're going to take Excel into action. Today we're going to use an example of a sales budget. Together with returns on those sales, and you might look at a different type of industry. You might be working in HR. What I'm trying to show you would be concepts that you can apply in any type of industry, whether you're working in a sales industry, whether you're working in HR and payroll, the concepts will remain the same. So let's launch into Excel and have a look at our structure for what we are going to show you this morning. So as you can see, I'm starting actually at the end point. And the reason why I do this is because this part, which would be the end point for this sales manager for their budget, needs to be thought of carefully ahead. So we have started by creating those KPIs, those measurements that we want to take for our budget. And we have categorized and we have stipulated how we wish to budget. We're budgeting over time. We are budgeting according to a region. We have different categories. And if you're working in a different industry and you wish to budget according to other measures, the concept will be the same. We need to be able to label what we want to see to get to our totals and our details of our budget. So this is in fact your starting point. What do you want to see by the end of creating your budget and establishing those labels, those KPIs that you are going to measure against? Then together with that, quite a popular method is also to use prior year information and taking us to the raw data that we are going to use in our concept and our design. I'm going to click on the sheet right next to my sales budget, bringing me to my raw data in Excel. So you might be receiving raw data from many different places. Quite often it's something that you download from a database, and it would be in an Excel or a CSV file, so historical information that's been recorded. And the very first part to this is to go and clean up that data and to give it the dimensions or the labels that you need in your design. So we are going to look at a few concepts and a few tips and tricks to assist you with cleaning up that data, and quite often it is a big part of your creation of a report, any kind of report, and in this case a budget and the analysis of the prior year information. So as you can see, we've got order date, region, city, categories, quantities. So Excel has the headings here at the top. We've got our instances below that, and we've got the detail quite organized from our downloaded database. Excel speaks a column language, so it will always work at its best, having headings at the top and the instances below, even if you want to create something like a pivot table, which of course we can show you in our Excel on steroids class as well. So the very first challenge for us is to have a column which is going to label the regions. Now I can see here I've got a region column already. I've got a city column over here already. In our sales budgets, we have specified our regions as cities, as you can see over there. So our sales budget is actually slightly different to the historical raw data. So we need to now go and put in the cities. And yes, I can copy paste this over, but do I want to always copy and paste things over? No, because you might make mistakes, you might not include all of the lines and so forth. So I'm going to show you a nice trick in Excel that you might have noticed before, but maybe you didn't know how to use it. On our data tab, it's called flash fill. And basically you are teaching Excel what to do through a prediction, and you use your flash fill button to go and populate the rest of the column. So I'm going to teach Excel that I want to have cities in my region column, and I'm going to hit enter. And as I go to my data tab, in my data tools group, I'm going to hit the flash fill button, and look what happens. It's filling it in for me. I can do the same with the categories. Now, the problem with the categories at the moment is that I've got two kinds of information in that one column. So the concept here, quite often it happens when you're downloading things from a database, you would have two kinds of information in the same column. So in this case, you've actually got a category for your products and you've got the specific product name, and we can't analyze based on that because we want to see the categories and the product separate to each other. We need them as separate labels. So we need to separate that out, and Flashfill can help us with that as well. So I'm going to type in bars and go to the second line. I'll hit Flashfill and it will fill in the rest for me. Flashfill can also work on its own prediction. Sometimes this prediction will pop up, sometimes it won't. We force it using the Flashfill button. And to get the product, I'm going to show you, it's going to give me a prediction as I start typing the next line. So there I've got the prediction. All I need to do to accept this prediction is to hit the enter button, and Flashfill filled the rest of the detail in for me. So what happens if new information pop in here? We've populated this using Flashfill, and as you get to know it, it takes about 3 seconds to let Flashfill do another prediction after new information populates our raw data sheet. Our next challenge with our budget, as you can see, we've got our different months as a financial year. Of course, our financial year doesn't run consecutively 1 to 12. It's starting in March, which is our 3rd month, and then moves across to February, which of course is the 2nd month of the year. So this usually provides a challenge to go and organize your data in a financial year capacity. And later on, we're going to use a formula that's actually going to speak to these headings at the top to grab the detail that needs to sit in the section for the sales as well as the returns. So we need our month labels to be numbering instead of wording, and we're using this for that formula to go and pick up the detail that we need. So going back to my historic data, how am I going to get all the months out of this? Yes, we can follow a manual path, we can filter, of course we can show you many ways, taking different formulas, text formulas and all sorts, but there's an easier way. And we are here today to show you an easy way. So we've got a function called month, and we're going to use that. So Excel populates dates as numbers. The date will be actually stored as a number. It's the amount of days we are away from the 1st of January, the year 1900. And it allows us to then take a date and convert it into different formats, use it in calculation and so forth. So every day it's just counted to a higher number, just a little bit of extra info there. When you play Trivial Pursuit, maybe that question will come up. Okay, so we will say equal month, and we are going to open our bracket. So this, in fact, this function is just going to take that serial number, and you see how Excel is guiding me what it wants. Maybe I forgot what I need to put in the brackets. It's telling me there, it's saying it wants a serial number. Now remember, a date is stored as a serial number. So I'm just simply going to choose that month to get the month categorization out of the different dates. So using my fill handle, which is that teeny tiny little cross, I'm going to double click it all the way down, filling in the formula all the way down. It now populates which month of the year and the number of that month sits in this column. As I mentioned, we've got lots of dates, functions that can be used and to manipulate dates, which can always be a problem in Excel as well. So the final challenge in our cleanup of our raw data today is to have an account category. So our sales budget, and you're going to have lots of categorizations in your budget, our sales budget needs a categorization to show that something is a sale or something is a return. So you might download figures from an accounting system that actually includes that type of labeling. What I want to show you is the concept of the function that we are going to use to assist you with any type of labeling that doesn't exist in your current raw data. Of course, this type of function, you are going to have to establish your own rules. So in our case, we are establishing a rule and we're going to say that we're using the total price to categorize whether something is a sale or a return. And the function that I'm going to show you is called the if statement. So the if statement works in 3 sections. And the first section of your if statement is going to be a rule. And that rule only needs a true or false response. So if you create a rule, you can literally say it back to yourself and say true or false. And then after that, you are going to establish what needs to happen when this rule becomes true. You also have the ability to establish what is going to happen if this rule is in fact false. Okay, so today I'm going to show you a different method of using a function. By the way, a function in Excel is not the same as a formula. A formula is something that you use a plus and a minus, division and multiplication, whereas a function is a programmed calculation, and you will give it the syntax that it needs. So you, probably most of you know sum. You are commanding Excel to use the sum function to go add things up. You're not using plus signs in between. So that's why I'm talking about a function instead of a formula in Excel. So instead of typing out my function, I'm going to go to my formula tab here at the top. And another concept that you can take away and possibly explore further or join us for some classes as well is to use this insert function functionality to guide you with new functions and how they work. So I'm going to click on insert function. And in the next pop-up, it's asking me, what do I want to see? So there is a little list here at the bottom of what I recently searched for. However, I want to show you how the search function works. I'm going to say if, and I'll hit the go button. And there, under select a function, I have if as a choice. So now you say to me, yes, but I won't know what that means. If I had to click on something new, I'm not going to know what that means. Have a little look here at the bottom. It says, checks whether a condition is met and returns one value for true and one value for false. So it's going to give you guidance. If you're exploring anything new, Excel will give you guidance all the way through in this insert function functionality. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click on OK. And further in my menu, it's now guiding me as well. So I have, first of all, the request to create something called a logical test. And a logical test means that I'm testing my rule. Is my rule true or is my rule false? So I need to create that true or false. In this case, my rule will say, take the cell in G2 and check whether it's smaller than 0. So G2 smaller than 0. Then you will notice here on the side, you've got the word true appearing. So that word tells me that whatever I've created over here is true. And it also tells me that there's no mistake in what I'm creating in this section of my function. Why? Because there's nothing red showing an error message over here. Next section, it's asking me value if true. Now, in 3 days' time, you're going to use this and you go, I forgot what this means. As you click on this, there where it says value if true, it's going to give you some guidance as to what this means. So don't forget about the guidance there at the bottom. Any questions from anyone? I've mentioned a couple of things. Just want to double check if we have some questions before I go any further. Let's have a little look. Okay, someone is asking if the session is recorded. Sorry, that's my fault. I forgot to mention, yes, the session is recorded and we're going to share the link with you a little bit later on. Okay, so we've got no questions so far. Let's see what magic is going to happen with this if statement. So value if true. Now remember right at the beginning when we did our poll, we mentioned that we've got issues with creating formulas and functions and creating reports and budgets that can adapt and has the functionality to adapt to changes. So the first tip I want to give you with regards to adapting to changes is to use in your formulas, rather use your cell references as much as possible. Try not to type into a formula. That's usually what I say to people. So yes, value if true, we can go and type in here and say, yes, when this becomes true, I want the label to say that this is a return because that's a minus. Or when the value is false, I can type in here to say the value if false needs to state that this is a sale instead of being a return. So yes, I can go and type it in there, but what happens tomorrow when your boss says to you, those labeling words would need to change? Then this sheet won't adapt because you have typed it into this formula or function instead of referencing the cell where it's actually coming from. So I'm going to move over to my sales budget instead. And I'm going to click on the word sales because that's the label that I'm using for my budget and my budget layout. Now you'll say to me, yes, but you are going to drag this formula down or this function down in your raw data to all the other lines as well. What's going to happen? This reference is going to move with it all the way through and it's going to fail. So the first challenge here is to make this function only look at cell A4. So how are we going to do that? I say use your sticky tape. What is your sticky tape? It's a $sign. So we are going to place a $sign in front of whatever part of this reference needs to stay static if we copy this function to another area. So if I put a $sign in front of the 4 from A4 over there, it means that the 4 behind it will never go to 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. If I put a $sign in front of the A, it means I'm going to, when I drag this across to the side, the A will never become a B, C, and so forth. So in this case, I need to put a $sign in front of the A as well as the 4 because I don't know, I might be dragging it to the side, I might be dragging it down, but I always just want to look at sales. So, shortcut, you don't have to insert that $sign manually by typing. You can use F4 on your keyboard. And as I press F4, you will notice there's a $sign in front of the A as well as the 4. Now, a little trick, if you press F4 again, maybe for some reason, when you're dragging your formula, you do want the A to become a B and so forth. But the $sign only needs to be in front of the row. So if I press F4 again, the $sign moves to be a reference in front of the A. And if I press it again, it's going to be removed. So F4 giving me the capacity to make this reference absolute, and it's called absolute referencing. And there it automatically gives me the result. So the concept here is the fact that we are we have the ability to change that word in our budget layout, and automatically it's going to adapt in this if statement, and it's going to assign the correct label. So if we change the word sales to revenue instead, it's going to adapt in the function, assign the correct label, and bring in the correct detail. So similar concept for false, except I think this needs to be smaller than 0. It needs to be returns, so it doesn't need to be sales. So let's just correct that. Okay, so when our rule becomes false, meaning that it's not less than 0, then of course we want it to be a sale because it's not a return, and we're going to go back to our sales budget and we include sales for that. And I'll hit F4 to make sure that my function is correct. Now you'll see that I'm standing on my sales budget sheet. And a mistake that quite often happens is that when you are done with your function, you want to go back to the place where you're actually creating this function. So quite often at this point, people go and click back to there where they're actually creating their function. And then the formula or the function adapts. So what I always say, when you're happy with the function and you know that it's correct and you're done with it, no matter where you are in your workbook, click OK. And if you're doing a formula, you're going to have to hit Enter. So we'll click on OK, and look at that, I'm back in my raw data sheet. So again, I can then populate this all the way down to make sure that I've got the correct labels in my historic data. So of course, I'm also keeping my historic data separate to the sales budget. That's another concept to remember. We are going to keep our raw data separate. Why? Because tomorrow you might have new data coming into this sheet at the bottom, and you quickly just need to update, dragging your formulas to the new lines, and that's going to be included in whatever changes in your sales budget. So to avoid confusion with where a formula sits and so forth for the sales budget itself, you want to keep your raw data as is separate to where you are creating your formulas and cleaning up your raw data. Okay, so to recap, we used flash fill very quickly to give our data dimensions and to separate it into the different KPIs that we want to read in our sales budget. We use our month function specifically to look at the different months and take that out of our dates. We used our if function, categorizing the different accounts and labeling them and giving them depth. And in our if statement, we had 3 parts. Let's quickly recap on that. We've got 3 parts. We've got the test part, which must be true or false. We've got the value if true, and we've got the value if false part. Okay, so we've got all we need in our raw data, and we're going to move over to our actual budget. So first things first, we need to now bring in the data according to the way we want to see it. So we want to bring in sales for Joburg, for bars. We're analyzing per category, per region. We're also in need of analyzing per month. And to do that, I'm going to move into a next function. Kind of the same as the if statement, just a little bit more specific. Some of you might have come across it before. It's called sum if, but we're taking it a step further. We're going to do a sum ifs with an S. So with sum ifs, what we are specifying is criteria. Remember, we've got criteria in here of what we want to go and add up out of our raw data. Our first criteria being months. Our second criteria being sales. Our third criteria being Joburg or Johannesburg. And our fourth criteria being bars. We've got all of that in our historic data. So we can use that labeling to then go and create what needs to be added up. I see Felicity mentioned you missed the if function. I will recap that for you in a moment. We do have a recording that we're going to share with you as well, so you're welcome to review that recording as well. Okay, so our sum-ifs function, we're going to use the concept of inserting a function again, and we will click on Insert Function under the formulas. And this time we're searching for sum-ifs. Let's hit the go button over there. There's our sum-ifs. If you again forget, it tells you here at the bottom what to do. So we're going to click on OK. First things first, it wants to know what to go and add up. So in our case, we're looking at the figures for our sales. So we're going to go back to our historic raw data. Let's move this slightly out of the way. And we're choosing the total price column, because that contains what needs to be added up according to our different categories. Now, very carefully remember that we need sticky tape when we create our formulas and functions that we're going to be dragging. So how are we going to add that sticky tape? We are going to use our F4 function to make the reference to this column absolute. So sticky tape in front of the G, so that when I drag it, it's not going to move. Also, you might have noticed that I used the entire column. Thinking a little bit ahead, maybe I've got data that needs to come into this document and added at the bottom of where my rows currently stop. So I'm including the entire column to make sure that if there is 10 more lines that's joining this, this detail, it's going to automatically be added to my sum-if function and formula. Okay, so I've got my sum range. Let's hit F4. There I've got my dollar signs. Then the first thing it's asking me is my criteria range. So which criteria am I using to sum the different figures? So the first criteria right at the top, if you think back of our sales budget, is the month. So our first criteria range is going to be the month categorization. So back in our raw data, let's choose column K. That is our range for our criteria. Again, we need the sticky tape. So in the line where we are creating our sum-if, we are now saying go and look for my months, and specifically in the column which I'm creating my sales budget in, I'm going to specify the criteria for this to be the 3 sitting in E3. I'm clicking back in this sheet on purpose because I want to show you certain things that happen that might become an error or create an error in a sum-if or any type of function. So remember, I mentioned that when you are clicking to different sheets, your function will follow you. So as I clicked in sales budget, you will notice that my criteria range then moved to sales budget K. So be careful of that. When you are clicking in different sheets, make sure that you are in the next part of your syntax before you click to where you want to go. So just be careful of your movement and make sure that in the syntax you are choosing the correct area for that specific part of the syntax. So let's just go back to our raw data over there. Make sure that we're choosing month. We'll hit F4. Okay, so the specific criteria for my months is sitting in cell E4. So for this sum-if, currently I'm looking for which month I need to add up. And in this case, it's going to be month number 3. I'm adding up everything that has the label month number 3. Again, we need our sticky tape. I'm going to be dragging this formula down. So I need to make sure that it won't move with me. So F4 is going to put the dollar sign in front of 1. Why don't I put a dollar sign in front of the E? Then have a little think about it. The reason is, if I'm dragging this across, I automatically want it to move with me. So that I create this function once, I drag it down, I drag it across, and it's going to move with where it needs to go. So no $sign in front of that E because it needs to move across as well. Okay, not done yet. I've got 3 more criteria to specify. So we're going to repeat our criteria, range, and criteria steps. Next criteria is the sales. So where's the range containing these labels? I'm going to click in criteria range 2. Let's go to that. And that sits in column L. So there's my account categories. And I'm going to hit F4 to make sure that that's static. The actual criteria for it, sitting in my cell A4, making sure that I only choose that cell. When I'm dragging it across, I'm going to hit F4 again. So this one I'm dragging across, but I only wanted to look at sales, so $sign in front of the A, I'm dragging it down, still needs to look at sales, so $sign in front of the 4. So usually by this point, people start panicking. They go, oh, but I've got more criteria to add. Where do I add it? Look at that, we've got a scroll bar on the side. So just using that scroll bar, we can get to more criteria. So our third criteria today is our region. So our criteria range is going to be where our regions are. So currently our regions sit in column H. So we'll hit F4 to make sure that we only look at that column. And the actual criteria wording for our specific line is sitting in cell B5. Now I need to make sure when I drag this across, I put some sticky tape. And I only look at this cell over here in column B. However, when I'm dragging it down, it needs to move to Cape Town, Pretoria, and Durban as well. So I'm only putting a $sign in front of the B, not in front of the 5. Why? Because in this case, I want it to move down as well. Okay, then I'm going to move to the next criteria. Okay, so our next criteria is going to be our categories. So we need to go and specify our categories, and we're going to hit F4 to specify our categories as well. Okay, the criteria for this is currently sitting in our sales budget and in our category column, and we're going to hit F4 to make sure that when we drag this across, it populates correctly. So immediately I'll see there, I've got a result. And I know that I've specified my conditions as well. So we'll click on OK. And look at that. I can drag this formula or function across. In this last one, it's going to move across. It's got the correct labels. I'm just doing a little sense check. And so I'm also dragging it into the next lines. Okay, then I'm going to move my function into the next section. Of course, only having to adapt that to return. So I'm going to hit Control V to copy that. And we are dragging our returns as the next specification for our budget. Okay. So we now have our different labeling and our specifications upon which we are going to base our budget. Together with that, I need subtotalling for Joburg, Pretoria, and Durban. So quickly, I'm going to show you how to create subtotalling automatically without having to insert lines and do some subtotals. So on our data tab, you will notice in our outline group, we have a subtotal function. So I have chosen all the headings here at the top. I'm going to base my subtotals on the different columns, and I'm going to say at each change in region, go insert a line and do a subtotal for me. So hitting the subtotal function, it's warning me that one of the columns doesn't have a heading. That's fine. We're going to click on OK. So now it's asking me at each change in which column are we adding our subtotal. So in our case, it's going to be region. Then we need to make sure that the subtotaling happens on the columns with the figures. And it's going to be columns 3 up until the total column. So as soon as I hit OK, we quickly added some subtotaling to our table. And it added the subtotal function to do that for us. It also added some grouping here on the side. So we can click on the 2 over there and it's going to collapse and expand according to that. Okay, so we've got some subtotaling, we've got some historic figures. Now we're moving into creating our budget. So creating our budget, of course, we have different methods. The concept I want to show you is that we are going to use a scenario of percentages, and these scenarios might change. You might have a best and worst case scenario that needs to adapt to whatever formula we place in here. So our formula is quite simply going to be, I am conscious of the time. I've got too much to show you. So our formula today is going to be, we're going to multiply our percentage by our historical figure. And we are going to drag this across and we're going to drag it down. So let's just make sure that we've got a dollar sign in front of the 1 over there. There you go. And then, of course, we just need to add the figure itself. So we're doing an increase in percentages. And we're going to drag this across. And it's going to populate with the different percentages, referencing the correct prior year figures. And we can populate that in our next lines as well. There you go. Okay, so adaptability. We need to be able to change these percentages. I want to show you our last little trick to do that, and it's called the what-if analysis. And the what-if analysis allows you to do interchangeable cells, and we are going to add a best and a worst case scenario. So best case scenario. So our current cells that we want to interchange with variable figures is going to be the percentage cells. So R1 up until AC1. As soon as I click on OK, it's telling me what these different figures need to be for my best case scenario. So I'm happy with that. I've established my best case. I'm going to add another scenario and I'm going to do a worst case. Same changing cells. And so now I'm going to adapt these figures to a worst case scenario. Okay, so if you are in a presentation or you want to review your budget in accordance to our best and worst case scenarios, we're going to click on our worst case, we're going to hit the show button, and immediately the figures relating to that is going to adapt. Why? Because we've created this with a formula that's referencing the cells containing that variable. So if I hit the best case again, I'm going to hit show. My figures will adapt according to my best and my worst case scenario. All right, so I think that's all we have time for today. And I just want to do a slight overview of what we achieved in our demo. Does anyone have any questions? I think you asked some questions as we go along, or you can ask some questions as we went along. I don't see any questions. Yes, we do have a recording that's going to be shared with everyone. If you want any more information on Excel or on our courses, we're going to share that in a moment as well. Okay, so let's quickly step through the main learning points. First of all, keep your raw data separate from your budget information. Secondly, use formulas and functions to automate. We've got our if statement, we've got our sum if. And then we're going to also be able to go and visualize what we are looking at in our totals and so forth as well. So if you want to join us for one of our courses, you're also welcome. We've got some lovely Excel courses, Excel Intermediate, Excel on Steroids courses, Excel on Steroids being a two-day class, Excel Intermediate a one-day class. We look more in depth at data analysis, pivot charts, more functions and data consolidation functionality as well. And you are welcome to contact us if you need any further information on that. I hope you enjoyed this hour with me. I wish I had more time to share with you more on how to use Excel in the most efficient way, especially with your planning and your budgeting. I wish you all the best. Please follow us on social media for any updates on our classes, on our webinars, on Facebook. There we've got our LinkedIn and Facebook tags as well. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you wish to know more about our webinars and our training as well. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish you all the best for 2022.